The arrival. Ambassador Zuexera of the Velkorn Republic stood before the massive viewport of her transport vessel, watching as the Grand Galactic Assembly Station grew larger against the backdrop of stars. Her violet scales shimmered with anticipation and nervous energy. After 12 solar cycles of rigorous training, she had finally earned this position. She was about to represent her people at the most important diplomatic gathering in the known galaxy. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering. It hung in neutral space between 17 different star systems, a massive structure that resembled a crystalline flower with dozens of petals extending outward. Each petal housed a different sector of the station, and at the center lay the great chamber where representatives from 300 species would gather to discuss matters of galactic importance. Zuexera adjusted her ceremonial robes, the deep blue fabric embedded with microcrystals that represented her homeworld's oceans. She had memorized every protocol, studied every species' customs, and prepared herself for any diplomatic challenge. Or so she believed. Her transport docked at Landing Bay 17, and she emerged with her entourage. Her security detail consisted of 6 Velkorn warriors, each standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick armored hide and carrying plasma rifles that hummed with deadly energy. They flanked her on both sides as she made her way through the arrival corridor. The corridor was filled with other delegations, and Zuexera found herself surrounded by the galaxy's diversity. She saw the Thraxian contingent passing by, their insectoid forms clicking and chittering as they moved in perfect synchronization. Their guards carried vibroblades that could cut through reinforced steel like soft tissue. Ahead of her, the Krell delegation made the floor vibrate with their heavy footsteps. These massive reptilian beings stood 4 meters tall, their bodies covered in natural armor plating that could deflect most energy weapons. Their security personnel carried graviton cannons capable of crushing a small vehicle into a compact cube of metal. To her left, the ethereal lumini floated past, their translucent bodies glowing with inner light. Even these peaceful-looking beings had guards equipped with neural disruptors that could shut down any organic brain function instantly. This was normal. This was expected. Every species brought their strongest warriors as a show of strength and deterrence. In the dangerous galaxy where political tensions could erupt into violence, only a fool would arrive unprotected. Zuexera entered the Grand Promenade, a massive circular hall where delegations gathered before formal proceedings began. The chamber stretched upward for 50 meters, its walls displaying holographic representations of every member species' homeworld. The floor was polished to mirror smoothness, reflecting the countless beings moving across its surface. She watched as more delegations arrived, each more impressive than the last. The Xyther came with guards wearing power armor that amplified their strength tenfold. The Kentari brought warriors carrying molecular disassemblers that could literally tear matter apart at the atomic level. The Barathian delegation included soldiers with biointegrated weapons that grew from their own bodies. Then the humans arrived. Zuexera noticed them immediately, not because they were impressive but because they were so ordinary. The human delegation consisted of only 5 individuals. 2 were clearly diplomats, wearing formal black suits with minimal ornamentation. The other 3 were guards, dressed in simple dark blue uniforms that appeared to be made of standard synthetic fabric. What struck Zuexera immediately was what they lacked. The human guards carried no visible weapons. No rifles, no blades, no energy projectors of any kind. Their belts held only communication devices and what appeared to be medical kits. They wore no armor, no protective gear, no energy shields. Their uniforms looked like they might stop a strong wind, but nothing more. She stared in disbelief. Were the humans mocking the assembly? Was this some kind of protest statement? Or were they simply foolish enough to believe that galactic diplomacy was safe? But then she noticed something that made her scales prickle with confusion. As the human delegation walked through the promenade, other species moved aside. Not obviously, not dramatically, but there was a clear pattern of beings creating space around the humans. The Thraxian warriors, who feared nothing in personal combat, adjusted their formation to avoid crossing paths with the human guards. The massive Krell, who could tear through blast doors with their bare hands, kept their distance. Most disturbing was the reaction of the Drachner contingent. The Drachner were apex predators from a death world even harsher than most. They stood nearly as tall as the Krell but were built for speed and lethality. Their natural claws could slice through armor plating, and their guards carried weapons designed to kill other Drachner, which meant they could kill almost anything else with ease. Yet when the humans walked past, Zuexera saw the Drachner ambassador take 3 steps backward. His guards tensed, their hands moving closer to their weapons, but they made no aggressive moves. They simply watched the humans pass with what could only be described as wary respect. Zuexera turned to her chief advisor, an elderly Velcorn named Thexael who had served in diplomatic corps for 40 cycles. His scales had faded to pale silver with age, but his mind remained sharp as ever. "Thexael," she whispered, keeping her voice low. "Why are the human guards unarmed? Is this permitted under assembly protocols?" Thexael did not answer immediately. He watched the humans disappear into the crowd, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Ambassador, there are many things about galactic diplomacy that are not written in official protocols. Some knowledge comes only with experience and observation." "That is not an answer," Zuexera said, frustration creeping into her tone. "I am asking a direct question. Why are they unarmed and why does everyone seem afraid of them?" Thexael's scales darkened slightly, a sign of discomfort in their species. "Perhaps, afraid, is not the correct word. It is more accurate to say that other species treat human guards with appropriate respect." "Respect for what?" "They have no weapons. They have no armor. A single Krell warrior could crush all three of them without effort." "Could they?" Thexael asked quietly. "Are you certain of that assessment?" Before Zuexera could respond, a commotion erupted near one of the chamber entrances. The Skrell delegation had arrived, and they were making their presence known in typical Skrell fashion with loud declarations and aggressive posturing. The Skrell were a warlike species known for their territorial nature and quick tempers. The Skrell ambassador, a scarred veteran named Krothax, strode through the promenade with his guards surrounding him. They pushed other beings aside without courtesy, their body language radiating aggression. This was a species that believed respect came only through demonstrations of strength. Zuexera watched as Krothax and his entourage moved directly toward the human delegation. The humans had stopped to speak with the Lumini ambassador near a decorative fountain. The human guards stood in a loose triangle formation around their diplomats, their posture relaxed, their hands empty. The Skrell guards were each carrying plasma accelerators, weapons that could punch through starship hulls. They stood 2 meters tall with thick muscular builds and natural bone ridges that served as armor. They looked like walking tanks compared to the humans. Krothax approached the human ambassador, a woman named Chin, and began speaking in a loud voice that carried across the chamber. Zuexera could not hear the exact words, but the tone was clearly confrontational. The Skrell leader was known for testing other species, for pushing boundaries to see who would push back. Ambassador Chin responded calmly, her voice quiet but clear. She showed no sign of intimidation. Her guards remained motionless, but Zuexera noticed something subtle. Their eyes had changed. They were no longer casually observing the room. They were focused entirely on the Skrell guards, tracking every movement with an intensity that seemed disproportionate to their relaxed body language. Krothax moved closer, entering what most species would consider hostile distance. His guards followed, their weapons held ready. The entire promenade had gone quiet. Everyone was watching this confrontation. One of the human guards, a male with short dark hair, shifted his weight almost imperceptibly. It was the smallest movement, barely noticeable, but somehow it changed everything. The nearest Skrell guard froze mid-step. His hand, which had been moving toward his weapon's activation trigger, stopped moving entirely. Krothax noticed his guard's hesitation and turned to look at the human. For a long moment, the Skrell warrior and the human guard locked eyes. Zuexera could not read human expressions well, but she saw something in the guard's face that made her own blood run cold. It was not anger or fear or aggression. It was something far more unsettling. It was calculation. The human was measuring the Skrell, evaluating him, deciding something that no one else could hear or see. The Skrell guard took a step backward. Then another. His companions followed suit, creating distance from the humans without any verbal command being given. Krothax snarled something in his native language, but even he seemed to recognize that this confrontation was over. He turned away from Ambassador Chin and stormed off, his delegation following behind him. The humans returned to their conversation with the Lumini as if nothing had happened. Their guards resumed their casual observation of the room. But Zuexera had seen something in that brief moment that contradicted everything she thought she knew about diplomatic security. The human guard had been unarmed. He had made no threatening gesture. He had not even spoken. Yet somehow he had made 6 heavily armed Skrell warriors retreat without firing a shot or throwing a punch. "Thexael," Zuexera said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What just happened?" Her advisor was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his words were careful and measured. Ambassador, I strongly advise you not to pursue this line of inquiry. There are some matters in galactic politics that are best left unexamined. I am the Velkorn ambassador to the Grand Assembly, Zuexera said firmly. I cannot perform my duties effectively if I do not understand the dynamics of this chamber. I need to know why everyone treats unarmed humans like they are the most dangerous beings here. Thexael sighed, a sound like wind through desert stones. Very well. But you must understand that what I am about to tell you is not official information. It is not written in any public record. It is knowledge that is passed quietly among senior diplomats, spoken in whispers and warnings. He moved closer, his voice dropping even lower. 15 cycles ago there was an incident. The Drachner Empire decided to test human resolve by attacking a diplomatic mission. They sent their finest commandos, 20 warriors trained since birth to kill. They ambushed a human delegation in neutral space. And? Zuexera prompted when he paused. The human delegation consisted of 2 diplomats and 2 guards. All unarmed as per assembly regulations. The Drachner attacked with full lethal intent. What happened? Thexael's scales had turned almost white. The battle lasted less than 2 minutes. When it was over, all 20 Drachner commandos were dead. Both human guards survived without serious injury. Zuexera felt her heart rate accelerate. That is impossible. 2 unarmed beings against 20 trained warriors? You must be mistaken. I wish I were. The incident was investigated thoroughly by the Assembly Security Council. The evidence was conclusive. The human guards killed all 20 attackers using only their hands and improvised weapons. The medical reports described injuries consistent with extreme physical trauma. Broken bones, crushed organs, severed arteries. But humans are not physically stronger than Drachner. They have no natural weapons, no claws or fangs or venom. No, Thexael agreed. But they have something else. Something that makes them far more dangerous than any species with natural weapons could ever be. What? They are persistence predators, Ambassador. On their homeworld, they evolved as hunters who never stop, never quit, never give up until their prey falls. That mentality, that relentless determination, translates into combat in ways that other species cannot match. When a human decides you are a threat, they will continue fighting until either you are neutralized or they are dead. There is no middle ground. Zuexera looked across the promenade at the human guards. They appeared so ordinary, so unremarkable. Yet according to Thexael, each of those unarmed beings was more dangerous than an entire squad of conventional warriors. After the incident, Thexael continued, the Assembly quietly passed a regulation. Human diplomatic guards are prohibited from carrying weapons. Not because they need them, but because armed humans would represent an escalation that no other species could match. An unarmed human is dangerous enough. An armed human is classified as a walking war crime. Zuexera felt her worldview shifting, cracking, reforming into something new and frightening. She had come to the Grand Assembly believing she understood how power worked in the galaxy. She had believed that strength came from weapons and armor and military might. Now she was learning that the most dangerous beings in this chamber were the 3 humans in simple uniforms, carrying nothing but communication devices, standing quietly while everyone else gave them space they never asked for. Is there anything else I should know? She asked. Thexael looked at her with ancient eyes. Yes. Never, ever threaten a human's diplomatic charge. They view protection of their assigned individuals as sacred duty. If you threaten a human ambassador while their guard is present, you will not survive long enough to regret it. As if to emphasize his point, one of the human guards glanced in their direction. For just a moment Zuexera met those eyes. They were calm, professional, and completely devoid of any emotion she could recognize. They were the eyes of a predator that had no doubt about its place in the food chain. She looked away quickly, her scales rippling with involuntary fear response. The opening ceremony would begin soon. Zuexera would take her place among the 300 ambassadors and listen to speeches about peace and cooperation and mutual understanding. But now she would do so with new knowledge, terrible knowledge that changed everything she thought she knew about humanity. They walked among the galaxy unarmed not because they were weak, but because they were too dangerous to carry weapons. And everyone knew it except her. Until now, the revelation. The opening ceremony concluded without incident, but Zuexera could not focus on the speeches or formal proceedings. Her mind kept returning to what Thexael had told her about the Drachner incident. 2 unarmed humans against 20 trained killers. The mathematics of such an encounter defied logic, yet her advisor had no reason to fabricate such a story. As the delegates dispersed for the evening recess, HFY made a decision. She needed more information and she knew exactly where to find it. The Grand Assembly maintained extensive archives, databases containing records of every significant diplomatic event in galactic history. If the Drachner incident had been investigated officially, there would be files, reports, evidence. She returned to her assigned quarters, a spacious suite designed to accommodate Velcorn physiology. The walls were programmed to display calming ocean scenes from her homeworld, but she ignored them. Instead, she activated her personal terminal and began searching the archive system. The basic search yielded nothing. References to human diplomatic missions appeared in hundreds of files, but none mentioned any violent incidents. She refined her parameters, searching for classified documents, security reports, anything that might have been restricted from public access. After an hour of fruitless searching, she found something. A file designation labeled Incident Report 7749D, Classification Level 7, Access Restricted. The file was dated 15 cycles ago, and the location matched what Thexiel had described. This had to be it. Unfortunately, her security clearance only extended to Level 4. She stared at the screen, frustrated. The information she needed was right there, just beyond her reach. She could request higher clearance through official channels, but that would take weeks and would raise questions about why she wanted access to restricted human-related files. There had to be another way. HFY thought carefully about the problem. The archives were maintained by the Assembly's Information Services Division, staffed by dozens of different species with varying levels of access. Someone in that department would have the clearance she needed. The question was finding someone willing to help her, and convincing them to break security protocols. She spent the next morning making discreet inquiries among her contacts. Diplomatic work involved building networks of favors and obligations, and HFY had been careful to cultivate relationships with beings across multiple departments. By midday she had a name. Vexthor was a junior archivist from the Nexian species. The Nexians were known for their obsessive attention to detail and their somewhat flexible interpretation of rules when it served their interests. Vexthor was young, ambitious, and reportedly struggling with significant personal debt. In other words, he was exactly the kind of person who might be persuaded to take a risk for the right compensation. They met in a quiet cafe on one of the station's lower levels, far from the diplomatic sectors where they might be recognized. Vexthor arrived looking nervous, his multi-jointed limbs twitching with anxiety. His species communicated partly through color changes in their skin, and his was currently displaying patterns that indicated uncertainty and fear. Ambassador HFY, he said, his voice a high-pitched warble. I am honored by your invitation, but I must confess I am uncertain why you wish to speak with me. HFY had prepared for this conversation carefully. She knew that direct bribery would likely frighten the young archivist away. Instead, she needed to appeal to both his greed and his ego. I have heard that you are one of the most talented information specialists in the archives, she began. Your supervisors speak highly of your ability to locate obscure records. Vexthor's skin shifted to a pleased orange. I do take pride in my work. The archive system is complex, and many less experienced archivists struggle to navigate its deeper layers. Which is precisely why I need your expertise. I am researching historical diplomatic incidents for a paper I am writing. Specifically, I am interested in cases where security protocols were tested or violated. I have found references to an incident involving human diplomats approximately 15 cycles ago, but the detailed files are classified above my clearance level. The orange in Vexthor's skin faded, replaced by a cautious yellow. Ambassador, accessing classified files without proper authorization is a serious breach of protocol. I could lose my position. I understand the risk, HFY said carefully, which is why I am prepared to compensate you appropriately for your time and trouble. I can arrange for a substantial payment in whatever currency you prefer. Additionally, when I return to my homeworld, I will be in a position to recommend talented individuals for various consulting contracts with the Velcorn government. Such contracts typically pay quite well. She could see the calculation happening behind Vexthor's eyes. The promise of immediate payment combined with potential future opportunities was clearly tempting. But he was still hesitant. Even if I wanted to help you, accessing level 7 files would leave traces in the system. Security monitors would detect the breach within hours. Unless, HFY said quietly, the access appeared to be part of routine system maintenance. I understand that archivists periodically review classified files to ensure data integrity. If someone were to access the file during such a review, and if a copy happened to be made for backup purposes, and if that backup somehow found its way to my quarters, well, such things happen in complex systems. Vexthor was silent for a long moment. His skin cycled through several colors that Zyxera could not interpret. Finally he leaned forward. 20,000 credits. Terran standard currency. Untraceable transfer to an account I will provide. And a written letter of recommendation for future employment opportunities. Agreed, Zyxera said without hesitation. When can you provide the information? Tomorrow evening. Meet me in Archive Section 7C at 22nd hour. That section is rarely used after dark, and the security monitoring is less intensive there. They parted ways, and Zyxera spent the rest of the day in a state of anxious anticipation. She attended the afternoon diplomatic sessions, but her mind was elsewhere. She was about to commit a serious breach of security protocols, something that could end her career if discovered. Yet she could not shake the need to understand what made humans so dangerous. The next evening, she made her way to Archive Section 7C as arranged. The archives occupied an entire deck of the station, vast halls filled with data storage systems and reading terminals. Section 7C was located in a remote corner, surrounded by files dealing with obscure trade regulations from centuries past. As Vexthor had promised, the area was deserted. The archivist appeared precisely at 22nd hour, carrying a small data chip. His skin was displaying nervous green patterns, and he kept glancing around as if expecting security personnel to emerge from the shadows. I have what you requested, he said quickly. But I must warn you, what I found is deeply disturbing. I understand now why this file is classified at such a high level. He handed her the data chip. I have transferred the credits to your account as promised, Zyxera said. And I will prepare the letter of recommendation. You have my word that this meeting will remain confidential. Vexthor nodded rapidly and hurried away, clearly eager to distance himself from this transaction. Zyxera returned to her quarters, locked the door, and activated her private terminal with security encryption enabled. The file that appeared on her screen was extensive, running to hundreds of pages of reports, medical analyses, security footage transcripts, and official testimony. She began reading, and with each page her understanding of reality shifted further. The incident had occurred at Diplomatic Station Kepler 7, a neutral facility used for sensitive negotiations between multiple species. The human delegation consisted of Ambassador Marcus Webb, his deputy Sarah Kim, and two security guards named Jackson Torres and Maria Santos. They were meeting with representatives from the Drachner Empire to discuss trade route disputes. The Drachner had planned the attack carefully. They sent 20 of their most elite commandos, warriors who had trained for decades in multiple combat forms. The plan was to take the human diplomats hostage and use them as leverage in broader political negotiations. The Drachner believed that humans, being physically weaker than most galactic species, would be easy targets despite their guards. The attack began at 1437 station time. The commandos breached the meeting room using specialized equipment that disabled the door locks and sensors. They expected to overwhelm the humans quickly through superior numbers and firepower. According to the security footage analysis, the first commando entered the room at 14 hours 37 minutes and 4 seconds. At 14 hours 37 minutes and 6 seconds, Guard Torres was in motion. At 14 hours 38 minutes and 40 seconds, the last Drachner commando fell. 96 seconds from start to finish. Zyxera read the detailed breakdown with growing horror. Torres had moved with a speed that seemed impossible for his species. The report noted that his initial acceleration had been clocked at rates that should have torn his muscles and ligaments. Yet he showed no signs of injury from the movement itself. He had crossed the room in less than 2 seconds, covering 8 meters before any of the Drachner could raise their weapons. His first target was the commando leader. Torres had struck the Drachner's throat with a precise blow that crushed the warrior's windpipe, then used the falling body as a shield against plasma fire from other commandos. What followed was described in clinical detail by multiple sensors and witness accounts. Torres moved through the commandos like a force of nature. He used every object in the room as a weapon. Chairs, table fragments, even pieces of the broken door. The report noted that he had torn a metal support beam from the wall and used it to block energy blasts while simultaneously striking down 3 commandos with devastating efficiency. Guard Santos had engaged simultaneously, protecting the 2 diplomats while eliminating any commando who tried to circle around Torres. Her technique was different, more focused on precision than power. The medical examiner's report noted that every Drachner she engaged died from strikes to vital points. Severed arteries, crushed organs, fractured skulls at precisely the weakest points. The Drachner were not weak opponents. They stood over 2 meters tall, possessed natural claws capable of shredding armor, and had reflexes honed by evolution on a death world where everything was trying to kill everything else. They were wearing combat armor and carrying military-grade weapons. 20 of them should have been able to overwhelm 2 unarmed humans through sheer numbers and firepower. Yet the mathematics of violence had worked in reverse. The humans had advantages that no amount of armor or weapons could counter. HFY found the xenobiological analysis section of the report. It had been prepared by Dr. Malthus, the Assembly's chief medical examiner, and it explained in scientific terms what made humans so lethal. First was their endurance capability. Humans were persistence hunters, evolved to chase prey across vast distances until the target collapsed from exhaustion. This gave them cardiovascular efficiency far beyond most species. In combat, this meant they could maintain peak physical performance for extended periods without tiring. The Drachner commandos had been bred for short, explosive bursts of violence. They expected fights to be decided in seconds. The humans could have fought for hours if necessary. Second was their pain tolerance. The report included neurological scans showing that human brains processed pain differently than most species. They could continue functioning at full capacity even while suffering injuries that would incapacitate other beings. Both guards had sustained wounds during the fight, including broken bones and deep lacerations. Neither had slowed down. They had simply continued fighting until every threat was neutralized. Third was their adaptability. Humans were tool users on a fundamental level. Their brains were wired to see every object as a potential tool or weapon. In the fight, Torres and Santos had used pieces of furniture, fragments of broken equipment, and even the bodies of fallen enemies as tactical advantages. They never stopped thinking, never stopped adapting, never stopped finding new ways to kill. Fourth was their tactical processing. The report noted that human brains had evolved to handle complex three-dimensional hunting scenarios. They could track multiple moving targets simultaneously while predicting movement patterns and planning attacks several steps ahead. In combat, this meant they were always thinking faster than their opponents, always one move ahead. But the most disturbing part of the analysis was the psychological assessment. Dr. Malthus had interviewed both guards after the incident. His notes described them as calm, professional, and showing no signs of traumatic stress. When asked how they felt about killing 20 beings, Torres had replied simply, "They were threats to my charges. I did my job." The psychological evaluation concluded that humans possessed something called compartmentalization, an ability to separate emotional responses from tactical necessity. They could kill without hesitation when duty required it, then return to normal social behavior immediately afterward. This mental flexibility made them uniquely dangerous because they never lost control, never acted from rage or fear. They simply identified threats and eliminated them with mechanical efficiency. HFY read the final section of the report, the recommendations from the Assembly Security Council. The language was carefully diplomatic, but the meaning was clear. Human security personnel represent an unprecedented challenge to traditional diplomatic security paradigms. Their capability to neutralize conventional threats while unarmed exceeds that of most species' elite military units. Recommendation: human guards should be prohibited from carrying weapons at diplomatic functions. Armed humans would constitute an escalation that no other species could match without deploying heavy military assets, which would violate assembly neutrality protocols. Current policy of allowing unarmed human guards provides adequate security for human delegations while minimizing potential for catastrophic escalation should violence occur. There was a final note, added by the Security Council chairman. It should be noted that Terran Alliance officials expressed willingness to comply with weapons restrictions. Ambassador Webb stated, and I quote, "Our guards don't need weapons. If a situation arises where they can't handle it with their hands, weapons wouldn't help either." This assessment, while disturbing, appears to be accurate based on available evidence. HFY leaned back from her terminal, her mind reeling. She had read the entire file, seen the evidence, studied the analysis. The conclusion was inescapable. Humans were the most dangerous species in the known galaxy when it came to personal combat. Not because they were stronger or faster or more durable than others, but because they combined multiple advantages into something that no other species could match. They had endurance that let them fight when others were exhausted. They had pain tolerance that let them ignore injuries that would stop others. They had adaptability that let them turn any environment into a weapon. They had tactical intelligence that let them outthink opponents who relied on instinct and training. And they had the psychological makeup to use all these advantages without hesitation or remorse. The galaxy had dozens of species stronger than humans. There were species with natural armor that could stop small arms fire. There were species with claws that could slice through metal. There were species with venom that could kill in seconds. But none of them combined all the necessary factors to be perfect killers the way humans did. And the humans themselves seemed almost embarrassed by this capability. They didn't boast about it. They didn't threaten others with it. They simply walked through diplomatic gatherings unarmed, doing their jobs while everyone else gave them space out of respect for what they could do if forced to act. Zuexera understood now why Thexael had warned her. This knowledge changed everything. She could never look at humans the same way again. She could never see their soft skin and small stature and lack of natural weapons without remembering that underneath that unremarkable exterior were beings who could kill trained warriors with their bare hands. The next morning, she returned to the Grand Promenade for another day of diplomatic sessions. She saw the human delegation arrive as usual, their 3 guards in simple blue uniforms, carrying no weapons, looking completely ordinary. But now she saw other things. She saw how the guards positioned themselves to have clear sight lines to all entrances. She saw how their eyes constantly tracked movement patterns. She saw how they maintained precise distances from their charges that would allow instant response to any threat. She saw predators wearing the disguise of civilization. During a break in proceedings, Ambassador Chen approached Zuexera. The human woman smiled warmly, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. Zuexera accepted, noting how the guard named Morrison shifted slightly, always maintaining optimal position. Ambassador Zuexera, Chen said pleasantly. I wanted to introduce myself properly. I understand this is your first Grand Assembly. How are you finding the experience? Educational, Zuexera replied honestly. I am learning that there are many aspects of galactic diplomacy that are not covered in formal training. Chen's smile didn't falter, but something changed in her eyes. A knowing look perhaps. Yes, there's always a gap between theory and practice. I remember my first assembly. I was overwhelmed by all the protocols and traditions. Did you bring security guards on your first assignment? Zuexera asked, unable to help herself. I did. Jackson Torres actually. Chen glanced at one of the nearby guards, a man with gray hair and calm eyes. He's been with me for 20 cycles now. Best security chief I could ask for. Torres nodded slightly, acknowledging the compliment, but his attention never left the crowd around them. He must be very skilled, Zuexera said carefully. Skilled is one word for it, Chen replied. Her tone was casual, but there was something underneath it. A warning, perhaps, or simply an acknowledgement of reality. The thing about good security personnel is that their best work is the work you never see. The threats that never materialize because potential aggressors recognize that escalation wouldn't end well for anyone. It was a diplomatic way of saying what everyone in the galaxy knew but few spoke aloud. Attacking a human delegation was suicide. I imagine your guards take their duties very seriously, Zuexera said. We all do, Chen agreed. The Terran Alliance believes that diplomacy is sacred work. We protect our diplomats absolutely because we protect the principle that disagreements should be resolved through words, not violence. When someone threatens that principle, when someone attacks our diplomatic missions, we respond with whatever force is necessary to ensure such attacks never become normalized. There it was stated plainly. Humans would tolerate almost anything except threats to their diplomats. Cross that line, and the unarmed guards became executioners. The conversation moved to other topics, but Zuexera never forgot the undertone of that exchange. Chen had been kind, professional, even friendly. But she had also made clear that there were boundaries that should not be crossed. As the diplomatic sessions continued over the following days, Zuexera watched humans interact with other species. She saw how skilled human diplomats were at finding common ground, building consensus, solving problems through negotiation. They were good at their jobs, genuinely committed to peaceful resolution of conflicts. But she also saw the guards, always present, always watching, a quiet reminder that humanity's preference for peace did not mean inability to wage war. On her final day at the Grand Assembly, Zuexera found herself standing near the viewing port where she had first arrived weeks ago. Thexael joined her, his ancient scales catching the starlight. You found the answers you were seeking, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Zuexera replied. Though I am not certain I am happier for the knowledge. Few are, Thexael agreed. But it is knowledge that serves us well. Understanding what humans are capable of makes us more cautious, more respectful, more committed to maintaining peaceful relations. because we fear them. No, Thexael corrected gently. Because we respect them. There is a difference. We fear the Drachner because they are cruel and unpredictable. We fear the Xyther because they are aggressive and expansionist. But humans? We respect them because they are dangerous only when forced to be, because they prefer diplomacy to violence, because they walk among us unarmed as a gesture of trust. He turned to face her directly. The galaxy has many warriors, Ambassador. It has many species that can kill efficiently. But humans are unique because they are warriors who choose peace. They could dominate through violence, but they seek cooperation instead. That choice, made freely despite their capability for destruction, is why they have earned their place in the assembly. Zyxera considered this. She thought about Ambassador Chin, who had been nothing but professional and courteous. She thought about the guards who had threatened no one, bothered no one, simply done their jobs with quiet competence. She thought about the fact that humans had complied with weapons restrictions without complaint, had accepted rules designed specifically to limit their effectiveness, and had done so because they valued peace more than power. They are remarkable, she said finally. They are human, Thexael replied. Which, as you have learned, is remarkable enough. As Zyxera prepared to return to her homeworld, she carried with her knowledge that would shape her diplomatic career. She understood now that power in the galaxy came in many forms. The Krell had their strength. The Xyther had their technology. The Drachner had their ferocity. But humans had something more valuable, the discipline to be deadly and the wisdom to choose not to be. They walked among the stars unarmed, not from weakness, but from strength so absolute that weapons would be redundant. And in that choice, in that daily demonstration of restraint, they had earned something that no amount of military might could achieve. They had earned respect. The galaxy feared many things. But what it feared most about humanity was not their capacity for violence. It was their capacity for mercy, because beings who could kill so easily but chose not to were beings who could never be fully understood or predicted. The human guards remained unarmed because they were already carrying the most dangerous weapons in the galaxy. Themselves.